So all my friends think I have a problem because every year I switch back and forth between Android and iOS. But in 2017, after my Note 8, I actually bought the iPhone X, and last year I got the iPhone XS Max. So it's been 2 years since I had Android. So just recently I bought the Galaxy Note 9 in an attempt to see just how Android has changed over the last few years. So today we're going to take a look at how things are. 2 weeks ago, I switched to the Note series. So I've actually already used this for about 2 weeks now. So this video is more like going to be how my experience has been in the last 2 weeks. So first things first, I want to go over the design. The iPhone has a really nice design, and in the hand, I gotta say the iPhone feels better than the Note. And I think it's mostly due to the way the iPhone is shaped. It has nice, smooth, rounded corners, and the Note just has a really weird, like curved little design here. It's really thin. The frame is really thin. And speaking of the frame, the iPhone has a stainless steel frame and this gold color, and it looks nice and feels nice. Whereas the Note has a aluminum frame and it's really thin and just doesn't feel as good in the hand. And one more thing that I like about the iPhone is just the way it looks. This is the gold color, but the back is kind of like a pinkish color, which looks really nice. The Note series looks pretty good too. I think the blue and the lavender color looks the best because it just has this really nice gloss to it. Speaking of the back, the Note 9 picks up fingerprints really badly. That's about 2 days of use right there. I just cleaned this Note like 2 days ago. And as for the iPhone, you probably won't really be able to see them as much. But that's the iPhone. It's actually not bad. The iPhone doesn't have that many fingerprints, which is really nice. Next off is the unlocking experience. On an iPhone, when the phone is turned off, all you have to do is pick it up, look at it, and it's already unlocked. You can see all your notifications here if there were any, and you just swipe up. On the Note, that wasn't the case, and I had to go through a lot of settings to really find where to do it to make it just like the iPhone, and now it's like the iPhone. And that's the one thing I liked about Android that I missed. On iOS, there are a lot of settings that you cannot change, a lot of things that you cannot do. On Android, there are a lot of settings. On this phone, there are settings, and then in the settings, there's another setting, and then in that setting, there's a sub-setting. So it's a setting within a setting within a setting, which is pretty crazy. On the iPhone, there's just your main settings page, and you just click one thing, and you got everything you want. Now, that's actually a good and a bad thing. It's kind of a bad thing in one way because it's really hard to find some settings that you can find on an iPhone much easier. Like, for instance, it took me a very long time to find out how to turn off the auto iris unlock because what it did is it unlocked everything and went to the home screen, so I couldn't even see my notifications. So that's the one thing I liked about the iPhone, but thanks to all the options you have, I made it just like the iPhone. Next off is the home screen. So this is how the home screen looks like on the Galaxy, and you swipe up to show all the icons. And I like this because you can customize the home screen to how you want it. You can also make it iPhone style, which is really nice. Whereas on the iPhone, you just have this one layout with a bunch of icons, and you can only arrange them. You can't really add widgets and stuff. Now, onto the camera. This is one thing that was interesting. Everyone said how Android has really good cameras and whatnot, and the Note 9 has a pretty good camera, but what's interesting about the camera is the colors. The iPhone camera is really good in terms of color accuracy. Now, if you look at this picture, the iPhone picture actually looks more true to real life than the Note picture. And I think this is due to like Samsung oversaturating everything. Another thing about the Note is the fingerprint reader. So there's a fingerprint reader on the back, and this is really useful because if you have an iPhone, you probably know this, but if you wake up in the morning to check your phone's not going to unlock most likely when you're laying down on the bed because you're going to be laying down like this. You're looking at like this on your phone, and I've had this issue with both XS Max and X. And even the Note has kind of like an issue sometimes unlocking, but it's not as bad as the iPhone. So that's where the fingerprint reader comes in really handy. You just do this and it's unlocked. Another cool thing I like about the Note is while there's no in display fingerprint reader, I can just press it down and it looks into my eyes and unlocks it automatically, which is really cool. Also, the Note has a USB Type C connector, and the iPhone has a Lightning connector. And this is where things get interesting because my iPad Pro has a USB Type C connector, whereas my iPhone has a Lightning connector. So I have to use two different chargers and switch back and forth to charge each device. And ever since I switched to my Note, it's been really convenient because I can literally use my Nintendo Switch charger, my iPad charger, or my Galaxy Note charger between all three of those devices and charge them. Whereas on this device, I had to use specifically a Lightning connector. Also, another cool thing that I like is the headphone jack is still in the phone. This is quite useful because not everything has switched to either USB or Bluetooth. I have a few devices that use the 3.5, so this is really useful. So one of the cool things about switching the phones was I was worried that's going to be a really pain in the butt to get all my data over, but there's an app from Samsung called Smart Switch, and this app is really interesting because you can receive data or send data either wirelessly or with a USB. So I used the wireless mode at first, and I wirelessly was able to transfer my contacts from the iPhone. And then I wanted to try the photo. So what I did is I used the USB Type C to USB connector that the Note comes with, and connected it to the iPhone, and I was actually able to transfer all my photos just like that. I mean, it took like maybe 30 minutes to do, and that was about 20 gigabytes of pictures, so it's not too bad. That was really interesting. When I used this phone last time, I don't think that was the case. I don't think they had an app like that. At least I didn't try it because I was kind of skeptical, but rest assured that that's a really good way to transfer your data. For the apps, I installed everything by itself because I like having a clean install. And that's where things get a little annoying. So Snapchat on Android still sucks. They're still using like an old API to do the whole picture taking thing, whereas iPhone is really optimized, and this was really noticeable because when I'm in Snapchat, everything is just not as smooth, whereas on the iPhone everything is really smooth. Speaking of smoothness, when I had the iPhone, I don't think I've ever experienced a stutter or like lag at all. And on the Note, I've had at least two instances where I had stutter or lag, and I think this is more due to the OS being optimized. Not only is that, but the processor is actually faster, according to Geekbench, for the iPhone compared to the Note 9. So it'll be more interesting when the Note 10 comes out, which is what I'm hoping to get. I'm probably going to sell this and get the Note 10 because this is 1-year-old phone. I've actually owned every Note device besides Note 7 and every iPhone device except for 5, so this is kind of a ritual for me every year. In terms of audio quality, I prefer the quality of the iPhone. It seems to be a bit louder and more full, whereas the Note sounds a bit more tinier, but it's not bad. Now, to fix that, there are some settings on the phone, and it dramatically changes the way the phone sounds, so that is really nice. It has Dolby Atmos, which is interesting. You can't really customize too much, but there's an equalizer so you can make it sound how you want it to sound, which is nice. The Note also has expandable storage, so it has a micro SD slot, and right now I have a 64 gigabyte micro SD in here, whereas the iPhone, the storage is fixed, so in the future you can't really expand, but most people probably don't really mind that, I guess, nowadays. One thing I do miss about my older Note 4 is the IR blaster. The Note series no longer have an IR blaster, and nowadays the Note series is just an S series phone with a pen, which is kind of sad. They used to have more features and better specs, but that's just how it is nowadays. Oh, one last thing. The camera is horizontally laid out on the Note, whereas on the iPhone it's vertically laid out. And the Note 10 is supposed to actually go to this vertical mode as well. And I think vertical might be a bit better because when you hold it like this, you're using the camera like this, and when you hold it like this, they're kind of like landscape style. Whereas on the iPhone, I mean the notes, it's like this, but when you hold it like this, it feels kind of weird. I don't know if that really makes much of a difference, but other than that, in terms of signal, I noticed that the Note 9 has better signal than the iPhone. There were times where my iPhone would have no signal, or in my friend's iPhones also had no signal on the same network. And then on my notes, I had like one bar, or I could browse the internet, which is really nice. So that's the one thing I didn't like about iPhone, at least the X series, is I noticed the signal wasn't as good as the older phones. And that's the one thing I like about the Android phones, is the signal's pretty good. So that's one thing. Also, I like the whole idea of things like hotspot and everything. I have no issues with hotspot. On the iPhone, before what would happen is, before I got the iPhone, I switched from my Android phone and I put my SIM card into the iPhone. And when I tried doing hotspot, it wouldn't let me. It said you need to contact your carrier to enable hotspot. And the iPhone is really carrier based. Like lots of features, it needs to be contacting your carrier. Whereas things like the Note 9, it doesn't really need to do that. It just enables hotspot without really needing any information, which is really nice in my opinion. With that though, I will say that I'm happy I switched to Android. I'm going to continue using Android, and I might get the Note 10 depending how much of a difference it is from this phone. And for this year, until next year, I'm sticking with Android despite all those things I said about it. It's actually a really refreshing experience. And at the end of the day, to be completely honest, the things I said were really more nitpicking, if you will. These phones are actually quite similar. Whether you use an iPhone or an Android phone, the experience is just so similar. The only things are the small things that I mentioned. But for a normal like user, I don't think they would really mind each one. I know people get really butthurt when they are using iMessage and they see you have green bubbles because you're using an Android phone. But in all honesty, I prefer using apps that are cross-platform, like WhatsApp or Kakao Talk, Line. So I use those apps. So for me, it's not too much of an issue. But there are some people that will complain that, oh, you switched to Android, we can't use iMessage now. Yeah, I know it sucks. I kind of like iMessage, but that's just how it is. The one thing I will miss is being able to take a picture on this phone, and it's already on my iPad and it's already on my MacBook, and other things like if I'm browsing the web on here on Safari and I go back to my MacBook, it's already open there. I think it's called continuity or something like that. I don't think Android has anything like that, so that kind of sucks. But the one thing I am happy about is the Type-C connector. I can plug my DSLR directly into here using a USB cable, and I can import all my pictures. And what's even more nice is this has a micro SD slot, and that's exactly what I use in my DSLR. So I can just use a little push pin to remove this, put the SD card in here, and have all my pictures in here. Whereas on the iPhone, it was a bit more annoying. So that's one thing I won't miss about iPhone. Anyways, guys, that's all I got for this video today. Next video will be about iPad OS and Mac OS developer betas. So subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.